Good morning, everyone. I call this business meeting to order, and I want to thank everyone for joining us today as we consider the nomination of Jeffrey Barron to serve as Commissioner of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. We'll also consider Senator Capito's accelerating deployment of versatile advanced nuclear for clean energy, or the ADVANCE Act. And as soon as a voting quorum is present, we'll proceed to a vote on Jeff Barron, President Biden's nominee to serve another term as Commissioner of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. I just want to pause for a moment and just to say special thanks to you and to everybody who's worked to help shape the ADVANCE Act. We all know we need to provide meet our energy and needs in this country. We need to do it in ways that do not exacerbate the challenges that we face with respect to climate. Nuclear is a great compromise. And I want to thank you very much for your work, and the members of both sides, and then Sheldon for your support as we crafted this legislation.
Happy to do it, Chairman.
Let me tell you a word or two, if I can, about Jeff Barron. Jeff Barron is a dedicated public servant who has served on the Nuclear Regulatory Commission since 2014. And throughout his time on the NRC, he has demonstrated his commitment to ensuring the safety and security of our nation's use of nuclear energy and materials. Commissioner Barron has also advanced America's energy security and efforts to slow climate change through the Commission's work to establish the right regulatory framework for the safe licensing and operation of new carbon-free technologies. And this includes the next generation of nuclear reactors and fusion energy systems. In addition, Commissioner Barron understands that his job is to serve the public, the people of this country. He has focused on providing opportunities for engagement and input from all stakeholders, especially those in disadvantaged and underserved communities. Finally, maintaining a full slate of commissioners will help the NRC continue to carry out its responsibilities effectively and efficiently. And with that in mind, I will vote yes on Jeff Barron's nomination. I urge my colleagues to do the same. At that point, and with that it's said, Senator Capito, let me yield to you for anything that you would like to share with us. Again, thank you for your leadership on this.
Well, thank you, Chairman Carper. And I want to begin by saying the news we got over the week is a happy sad for us to know that you're going to be joining Senator Cardin into a better life, and that's life after the Senate. I do want to pay tribute to your service, but I'll do that as we move through the year because you're not going anywhere.
Let me just say, so many people have been so kind in the last week, and if I'd known folks were going to be that nice, I might have stepped down earlier.
The one thing I will say is we have a lot in common. We're both native West Virginians, as we both remark about our love for our state, but also through your entire service, you've served on this committee. And that's the same with me, although my service is much shorter than yours. So I will move to the issues at hand. Nuclear energy is critical to strengthening our energy and national security, providing for energy reliability, and achieving our environmental goals. Our geostrategic rivals are offering long-term nuclear energy deals to establish energy-dependent relationships around the globe and dominate the nuclear energy landscape into the 21st century. America can and should lead in nuclear energy, and that's why I introduced the ADVANCE Act. ADVANCE Act is bipartisan with 16 co-sponsors. The chairman is on the bill, Senator Lummis, Senator Whitehouse, Senator Ricketts, Senator Cardin, Senator Graham, and Senator Kelly, all members of this committee. It will assert America's global leadership in nuclear energy. The legislation will assist states like my home state of West Virginia to repurpose brownfield sites by deploying advanced nuclear reactors at previously developed facilities like decommissioned conventional power plants. The bill incentivizes nuclear innovators to rapidly develop new technologies. The bill requires the Nuclear Regulatory Commission to identify and resolve key regulatory issues like advanced manufacturing and construction techniques, advanced nuclear fuel licensing, and non-electric uses of nuclear to enable greater use of technologies. It extends a key federal policy to provide backstop insurance coverage to help deploy more nuclear energy. The bill reduces excess regulatory costs and cumbersome red tape. The Carper Capito Manager's Amendment makes targeted improvements to the introduced bill based on the bipartisan feedback that we got from our colleagues. The amendment supports early licensing work to enable the deployment of advanced nuclear reactors at critical national security infrastructure sites. The amendment adds clarity to the NRC's new authority to hire and retain expert staff to ensure licensing reviews are successfully completed. In short, the Bipartisan Advance Act will jumpstart the deployment of new, safe, and reliable nuclear technologies. As the Advance Act moves forward, I hope we will continue to work together to incorporate additional bipartisan policies that arise to enable efficient, safe licensing reviews. The NRC is tasked with licensing and regulating nuclear material to ensure reasonable assurance of adequate protection of public health and safety, to promote the common defense and security, protect the environment, and improve the general welfare. Advancement of the NRC's important mission is why I so strongly support the aptly named Advance Act, but why I oppose the other business item we are considering today, which is the renomination of Jeff Barron to serve as a commissioner. We stand at a pivotal moment, ready to accelerate the liftoff of new advanced reactors and renew American leadership in nuclear. Unfortunately, Commissioner Barron is not the right fit for this moment. NRC commissioners establish the standards and safety regulations to enable America's nuclear companies to fulfill our nation's established nuclear energy policy goals. Since Commissioner Barron joined the Commission in 2014, he has pursued policies supporting his regulatory philosophy. That philosophy has frustrated, I believe, the mission of the NRC. He has called for unjustifiably increasing regulatory burdens and reducing regulatory predictability. His record supports ratcheting up regulations and associated compliance costs to really no useful end. During his renomination hearing, he tried to distance himself from that record, espousing priorities that are 180 degrees removed from how he actually voted during his 2 terms as a commissioner. I am considering his renomination based on his record, and continued service of Commissioner Barron on the Commission, in my view, would impede America's advancement towards a future of nuclear energy leadership to the benefit of Russia and China geostrategic plans, and would limit access to clean baseload generation at home and abroad. So for these reasons, I cannot support and urge my colleagues to oppose Commissioner Barron's nomination, and I thank the chairman for scheduling this business.
You bet. Happy to do it.
I'd like unanimous consent, to enter letters of support from more than 30 labor, environmental, NGOs, and business groups, and a letter of support from American Nuclear Insurance.
Yeah, without objection, so ordered. We're awaiting the arrival of Senator Fetterman. When he's here, we will vote right away on the nomination of the NRC commissioner. I'm going to take just a minute until Ms. Senator arrives here, just to mention a couple of other things on the Advance Act. As our nation's largest source of reliable carbon-free electricity, nuclear energy is critical to meeting our climate goals and maintaining our energy security. This bipartisan legislation will help the United States remain a clean energy leader by providing the certainty needed to safely deploy the next generation of nuclear reactors and fuels. The bill will also aid tribal communities and communities facing economic challenges associated with retired nuclear plants and stranded waste. In addition, the Advance Act will help ensure that the Nuclear Regulatory Commission has the tools and the workforce to keep our current reactors safe and to efficiently review new nuclear technologies. Preserving and expanding our nation's use of clean and reliable nuclear energy is also essential for our economic and for our national security interests. This bill will help strengthen the U.S. nuclear supply chain infrastructure and will support the export of American nuclear technologies, benefiting the domestic industrial base and filling a vacuum that would likely otherwise be filled by China and Russia. I thank Senator Capito and Senator Whitehouse again for their leadership, collaboration on this legislation. I want to thank everybody on this committee who has participated in crafting this bipartisan legislation. And I urge our colleagues to join us in voting yes on this bill. Still waiting the arrival of Senator Fetterman. Sheldon, please.
Let me just say some quick thanks to you and to Ranking Member Capito. I think this is the 4th nuclear reform bill that I've worked on in a bipartisan fashion. I want to recognize Senator Barrasso and Senator Crapo, who've done good work in this space as well. But Senator Capito has really been a terrific partner, and I want to thank her for this. And Chairman, your work has been really exemplary, not only supporting us in the design of the bill, but also putting together the manager's amendment that will, I think, enhance smooth passage forward of the measure. So much appreciation to the both of you, and let's hope for a good day in the committee.
All right. Bernie.
Senator Carper, any way that we could start the vote?
Yeah, we're going to
Beautiful.
start the vote on the Advance Act.
Okay,
and
thank
I think
you.
that's,
We can't start the vote.
no?
We can start the vote on Barron.
Can we start the vote on the Advance
Yeah,
Act?
just
We
keep
can.
it open.
Good, okay. I now call up S 1111, the Advance Act. In early April 1, I joined Senator Capito and Senator Whitehouse in co-leading the introduction of the bipartisan Advance Act. Over the following weeks, Senator Capito and I worked to refine that legislation with the help of a lot of you. Those refinements are embodied in an amendment in the nature of a substitute, which I circulated yesterday morning. This amendment represents non-controversial changes from the legislation as introduced. And by unanimous consent, the Carper Capito amendment in the nature of substitute is considered to be the base text for the purpose of today's markup. Is there an objection? Hearing none, so ordered. Does any senator wish to offer an amendment to this legislation?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, please.
I'd like to call up Lummis Amendment 1. This amendment is simple. It clarifies that two federal agencies should not be doing the exact same environmental analysis on a project. This is a classic example of government waste and duplicity. In my home state of Wyoming, we're having this TerraPower project that is planned to build a new advanced reactor called Natrium at a retired coal-fired power plant in Kemmer, Wyoming. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission is already licensing this site and doing the NEPA analysis. Unfortunately, a totally new office at the Department of Energy, the Office of Clean Energy Development, established under the recent bipartisan infrastructure law, stepped in and asserted that they needed to do their own environmental analysis of the project rather than deferring to the NRC. This is duplicative, it is wasteful, and an unnecessary delay of a project that I believe both sides support. I won't be requesting a vote on this amendment, but I do hope to highlight exactly why permitting reform is necessary. I'm proud to support the underlying bill. As a co-sponsor, I appreciate Ranking Member Capito and her staff, as well as you, Mr. Chairman, for your work on this legislation. I withdraw my amendment.
Thank you so much. Other amendments, please. Hearing none, the clerk will call the roll on the Advance Act, please.
Mr. Baldwin. Yes. Mrs. Capito.
Yes.
Mr. Gardner.
Aye.
Mr. Graham. Aye. Mr. Fetterman.
Aye by proxy.
Mr. Graham.
Aye by proxy.
Mr. Kelly. Ms. Lemon. Mr. Markey.
Sanders is also aye by proxy.
Mr. Merkley. No. Mr. Mullen.
Yes.
Mr. Padilla. Yes. Mr. Ricketts. Mr. Sanders.
Aye by proxy. No? Pardon? No by proxy. Others? Any others? All right.
Ms. Stabenow. Mr. Sullivan.
Aye by proxy.
Mr. Whitehouse.
Aye.
Mr. Wicker. Yes. Mr. Chairman.
Aye? The clerk will report.
The Chairman, the yeas are 16, the nays are 3.
Well, the legislation is favorably reported, and I'm grateful to everyone who came and stayed. And we still have some work ahead of us on the Nuclear Regulatory Commission nominee. I hope we can maybe take care of that off the floor today. We'll see if that can be worked out. That would be good. I think we can probably let people go now. And for anyone who wants to stay and make statements for the record, you're more than welcome.
Senator Markey.
I'm sorry?
Senator Markey has remarks.
Why did we not vote down?
Yeah. Anybody who wants to stay and make share remarks, that'd be fine. Senator Markey, I understand you may have something you'd like to say. You're more than welcome to do that.
We need to say it one more time.
Yep, thank you, Mr. Chairman, very much.
Conforming change.
I understand, Mr. Chairman, that this legislation is important to many members of the committee, but we should not give a boost to the nuclear industry without commensurately confronting the longstanding issues of how to deal with nuclear waste.
Committee will be in order, please. Committee will be in order.
Of how to deal with nuclear waste and nuclear decommissioning. If we support new plants with reactors without addressing the needs of operating reactors and affected communities, we will be adding radioactive fuel to a fire and making our existing problems worse. The ADVANCE Act takes unprecedented steps to have the Nuclear Regulatory Commission promote nuclear exports, not simply nuclear safety, which is its core mission, all to prop up the ailing U.S. nuclear industry at home and abroad. And I remain deeply concerned about this extension of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission's mission. It's supposed to be a regulator. Other agencies are supposed to be promoting American commerce. That's not the job of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. Its job is to promote safety. It's to ensure these plants are safe. That's what happened back in 1974. We broke the Nuclear Regulatory Commission off from the Atomic Energy Commission, so there would be separate missions, separate goals, separate responsibilities. And now, to turn the Nuclear Regulatory Commission into an agency that's promoting a technology it is supposed to be regulating begins to blur this role, especially as we're talking about exports overseas. I'm also concerned that in Section 103 of this legislation, it could allow the NRC to skirt the critical non-proliferation safeguards in this bill and unilaterally approve an export license for foreign countries to receive nuclear materials. That could present a significant non-proliferation risk and put a domestic nuclear safety agency in charge of important national security decisions. With all due respect to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, the Commission was never meant to be in the business of deciding if Saudi Arabia gets nuclear materials. We're blurring the historic role that this agency plays. This legislation is not wise. Okay? We have to keep these lines strong. Moreover, I'm concerned that Section 104 has an overly expansive definition of embarking civil nuclear nations. We need to be much more cautious when exporting such risky and dangerous technologies. And while some of the bill's supporters argue we need new nuclear technologies to combat the climate crisis, I have an arched eyebrow as to why this bill focuses solely on nuclear energy and not on other zero emissions technologies such as wind and solar and geothermal, which is what our country should be promoting around the rest of the world. It's also short-sighted to me to make such a Herculean effort to promote new nuclear technologies when we're yet to solve the long-standing problems resulting from our existing nuclear fleet. To this day, the Navajo Nation is dealing with the legacy of uranium contamination, including more than 500 abandoned uranium mines and homes and water sources polluted with elevated levels of radiation. And while Section 405 of the ADVANCE Act acknowledges this ongoing concern, the funding authorized in this legislation will not address the full legacy of radioactive pollution. Providing a capped level of authorized funding for communities dealing with this radioactive legacy contrasts greatly with Section 202 of the bill, which allows for nuclear companies to receive an uncapped award for licensing costs. So it is deeply disappointing to me that we're capping costs for cleanup, but not capping prizes for technologies that will likely rely on uranium which caused this pollution in the first place. And additionally, while this bill provides some funding to assist communities impacted by the closure of impending nuclear power plants, it does not include legislative proposals that would fully address the concerns of communities struggling to overcome the social and economic burden of indefinitely hosting stranded nuclear waste when there is no long-term storage solution in sight. Our communities have become de facto nuclear storage facilities, endangering them, their families, and the environment. These communities, including those in Massachusetts, around the Pilgrim Nuclear Power Station, deserve more funding, a meaningful say in the decommissioning process, and a real pathway to consent-based, long-term storage for our nation's spent nuclear fuel. And that's why I've supported and introduced legislation in the past, like the Nuclear Waste Task Force Act and the Dry Storage Act and Senator Sanders' Nuclear Plant Decommissioning Act. Chairman Carper, I want to work with you as we're moving forward between here and the floor. I think that there are many problems with this legislation. There are real nuclear nonproliferation issues here. We know that there are countries around the world, including Saudi Arabia, that have potential instability, and we don't want to wind up in a situation where nuclear power plants have been sold to North Korea, which then turn into nuclear bomb factories. Nuclear power plants have been sold to Iraq, which then turn into nuclear bomb factories. Or in the instance of Iran, we were going to sell 6 nuclear power plants to Iran in the late 70s and had already finished that deal before the Shah of Iran fell. Can you imagine if they had 6 nuclear power plants that had already been constructed with U.S. aid in the 1970s before the Shah fell? Well, that's what we're talking about here. And I just want to make sure we understand that as we are going to become nuclear Johnny Appleseeds and encouraging the Nuclear Regulatory Commission to be promoting this nuclear technology around the world with lower safeguards in terms of what the protections are, then yes, in the short term, the nuclear industry will reap the financial benefits of it, but inevitably, inexorably, the world will reap the whirlwind. Okay? And the next Ayatollah or equivalent somewhere in the world would then have access to the nuclear materials that could hold the whole world hostage. So from my perspective, I just think a lot more thought has to go into this legislation. Safeguards have to be included, and I just want to have an opportunity to be able to work with you, Mr. Chairman, and the ranking member to build in those safeguards.
Thank you, Senator Markey. Let me just say, I don't, while I don't fully agree with your characterization of the legislation, I hear your concerns. Your staff has shared those with us as well. I'm sure they've shared those concerns with Senator Capito's staff. And we look forward to finding, if we can, ways to address our nation's growing nuclear spent fuel and ways to ensure that we have an effective and efficient decommissioning process that helps us safely, when needed, close a nuclear site. I'm committed to working with you on those issues. Senator Markley.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think my colleague from Massachusetts has laid out and summarized more eloquently than I can concerns that I do have. I do want to emphasize that blurring the distinction between export promotion and nuclear safety is a huge mistake. And we have nations that very much want nuclear technology, and my colleagues mentioned Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia does not want the gold standard. They do not want international supervision. We have to remember that there is a Shiite force, a major force in the Islamic world, and there is a Sunni force. And those two countries, Iran and Saudi Arabia, are in competition with each other. And here we are putting extraordinary restrictions on Iran, which I have supported, although I would have liked to have seen the deal that really dismantled their operations sustained, a massive mistake that increased risk in the world for the Trump administration to exit that agreement. But we seem to feel like there's some massive difference with Saudi Arabia. We should remember that there is no way Iran is not going to pursue a weapon if Saudi Arabia is pursuing a weapon. And Saudi Arabia is much more on that track than Iran is, ironically. And they're also developing the missiles to deliver it. So we should be very careful about taking a safety organization that has integrity, that has responsibility, that has clarity on safety, and saying that they should promote the export of nuclear technology. There's far more complicated issues in the world. We should not blur that distinction. And Saudi Arabia is not on the banned list here, and there's no condition about the gold standard that we have previously promoted if we were to export, so that we would not end up essentially putting them on the track that we're saying that we do not want Iran to go down. I have supported the development of small nuclear reactors, knowing that we have not solved either the nuclear weapon nor the dirty bomb problem, simply because I felt like the research on an ultra-safe reactor was extremely important in a world in which we're facing climate change. But how and when these are deployed, where they can create risks in international affairs that include dirty bomb risks and nuclear weapon risks, should never be confused with the issue of safety done by the nuclear agency, Nuclear Regulatory Commission. I share a lot of my colleagues' concerns.
I thank you both for your thoughtful comments. Let me yield to the author of the legislation, Senator Capito.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think take the gentleman's concern into consideration. We had a very overwhelming vote in committee, 16-3. I think that shows the desire of the members of the committee to move forward on this technology and to move forward on the development of the technologies. I mentioned in my statement that we will be hopefully working this bill further as hopefully we can get to the floor, and we'll have conversations with your staffs. I would say the mission of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission is safety. That is number one. Anytime they are before our committee, anytime we've talked with them, that is their number one mission. And they not just espouse it, practice it, and verbalize that every single time they're in front of our committee. And so I am sure with the Advanced Act, that would be front and center as well. I do think that if we as a country can become and become the chief technologist, the chief developer, the chief innovator of these smaller modular reactors, we can lead the world, and we can put safeguards, in that if that's what the desire of the committee would be. So I appreciate your all's concern. I know the waste is a concern, but I do think remember where I'm from. So I'm from a state that generates a lot of natural gas and coal and has for 100 years at least. And every day I hear how everything needs to be cleaner and greener. And this technology would lead us to that and provide us a base load energy source and could recommission areas in my state and other states, thereby, helping us with job loss and other things that are connected with as we're moving forward. So let's just keep working it together, and I appreciate you all staying later and giving us your thoughts. Thank you.
Yeah, please, Senator Markey.
The problem is this, that there's a dual identity to nuclear energy. In the hands of some, it has this incredible ability to generate electricity that has this unfortunate side product of uranium and plutonium. But in the eyes of others, it has this incredible ability to give access to plutonium and uranium that has a wonderful side benefit of electricity as well. And that's what those countries, those individuals will be trying to focus on. But because of its dual identity, we have to be very careful. We haven't solved the nuclear waste problem in our own country. We don't want uranium and plutonium, in other countries in the world without full scope safeguards. And if we're going to be exporting and we're going to be promoting these technologies, then we have to promote the gold standard. We have to promote full scope safeguards. That's where we need the leadership. We're not going to be the leader on the technology, but we can be the leader on the values that we attach to the technology, the standards that we attach to the technologies, the goals that we have for our planet and our society for these technologies, and that's what's missing here. So I just want to make sure that as we are going forward, that we have a full discussion about that, because we have to be speaking with a loud, clear voice about what our expectations are, not just for ourselves, but for the rest of the world as they compete with us, because we can't have them continually lowering their standard. And we're going to lower ours as well in terms of those safeguards, because then we've just become nuclear merchants out on the road hawking our wares, and ultimately, some point, maybe not 5 years from now, or 10 or 15 or 20, there will be, unfortunately, a compromise of this technology, and then that generation will have to deal with the fact that we didn't build in the safeguards up front. So I'm just looking forward to working with you.
And both Senator Capito and I and our staffs look forward to working with you. I want to thank both you and Senator Markley for your comments, thoughtful comments. And in closing, I would just say, achieving our economy-wide decarbonization goals requires a diverse set of solutions, as we know, and nuclear energy has an important role to play in that regard. The ADVANCE Act builds on the actions we've taken through bipartisan infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act to preserve and expand our nation's use of nuclear energy. This bill is, I believe, an exciting step forward. I thank Senator Capito and her team very much for her leadership, their leadership, in collaboration on this important piece with Senator Whitehouse, my staff, myself. We look forward to working with our Senate colleagues to pass this legislation, make it better if we can, and send it to the President's desk. Finally, I'd like to ask unanimous consent to submit additional materials relating to the morning's votes to the record, including letters of support for the ADVANCE Act of 2023. I also ask unanimous consent that the staff has the authority to make the technical and conforming changes to each of the matters approved today. Is there objection? Hearing none. With that, this business meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.